Good evening. Welcome to tonight's class of the Air Force Rabbi and the Torah. I'm Chaplain Major Avram Cohen, retired U.S. Air Force chaplain. Today is the 18th of Cheshvan. We are learning Ilui Nishmas, that should be a merit for the soul of my grandfather, Yaakov Israel, who passed away in 1988, I believe it was, and tonight is his yahrzeit. So we're doing something a little bit different this week. In light of the events, the terrible tragedy in Simchas Torah, we're going to talk about those events in the context of the Torah sources and see what we can learn from the Torah about this. So the first thing we're going to be doing is we're going to pull out the book in Bamidbar, which is Numbers chapter 24. If you want to get a copy, there's one right there. And we're going to go through verses 20 through 24. So those verses. So this is talking about the prophecy of Bilam. Now, in Jewish tradition, there were just a handful of non-Jewish prophets. Prophecy is Jewish martial arts. To be a prophet, a Navi, a person has to be a Torah Jew, never have sinned in his entire life, and be a tremendous Talmud Chacham, know the entire Torah. And when he goes to learn how to get the prophecy, what verses to cite, prayers and things like that, so that the soul leaves the body, and God prints a message on his soul. All the other prophets can hear the prophecy, but they know it's his because it's said in his name. And if he falsifies it, they'll know that he's a false prophet because everybody heard what God said. All the prophets heard what God said. Moses was different. Moshe did not have to go into that type of trance, because all the other prophets, when they would get their prophecy, they would lose all control of their motor skills, and they go into a convulsive state. Moshe didn't have that issue. Moshe spoke directly to God, not face to face, but face to behind the partition. Now, Bilam was one prophet. Eov was another non-Jewish prophet, and that was really it. Joseph Smith, the Mormon Church, was not a prophet. Muhammad was definitely not a prophet. Jesus wasn't a prophet. The prophecy ended with the destruction of the first temple. So there were no other prophets subsequent to that. So anybody who says they're a prophet, of course, is lying because they're not meeting the Jewish requirements. Bob Dylan, maybe they might have thought Bob Dylan was a prophet, but to my knowledge, he's not proclaimed anything. The Lord spoke to me and said. All right, so the first one we're going to look at is Amalek. Is Bilam, and it says, verse 20. It says, "Vayar es Amalek v'yisa moshlo v'yamer reshis goem Amalek v'alariso adead." So when he saw Amalek, he took up his parable and said, "Amalek is the first of the nations, and his fate shall be everlasting destruction." So Israel is the first among the nations. It says so in the first verse in the Torah, Bereshis Lakimas Shemai V'Saaretz, and that word Bereshis is actually talking about for Reshit, the first of the nations, which is the Jewish people, and our nemesis, our arch nemesis, who is the counter opposite to us, is Amalek. They're the nation that has always attempted to destroy us, coming out of Egypt. Haman was an Amalekite. Hitler, Yamach Shemo, was probably Amalekite. Hamas definitely are Amalekites, and definitely as far as I can say. So this is talking about what's when God is gonna purge the world of the Amalekites, and all the wicked in the world, and he's going to restore. He's going to bring about the messianic redemption, and the Messiah will gather in the exiles, rebuild it. First he's going to fight Israel's wars. Then he's going to gather in the exiles. Then he's going to rebuild the temple and establish the Sanhedrin, etc. Those are requirements. That's how we know if a person is the Messiah or not, because our tradition is that those have to be the requirements. When I was in the military, a guy came into me and he said, "Hey, Rabbi, can I talk to you?" I said, "Sure, have a seat." came out. He goes, "Oh, where are you from?" Pittsburgh. I was like, "Oh, where'd you go to school?" Yeah. So he's small talking with me. And I'm like, "Do you? Is there something I can help you with?" And he said, "Well, I'm a Christian, right?" And I said, "Okay, yeah." And he said, "So I just don't get it. Where do the Jews get off believing that Jesus isn't the Messiah?" And I said, "Let me ask you a couple questions. True or false? The Bible is called the Torah. I said, true. I said, the Torah is written in Hebrew. True. Okay. True or false? Most Christians can't read Hebrew." He said, "I'd have to say that's true." And I said, "Okay. True or false? The Messiah is a Jewish concept." He said, "That's also true." I said, "Okay. So what you've just admitted to is that Torah is a Jewish book. It's in Hebrew. The concept of the Messiah is Jewish. So we're the custodians of that. We teach it to the world. So my question is, where do the Christians get off telling the Jews we don't know what we're talking about?" Okay? So any case, but in order for the nations not to be able to say, "Hey, you should," if you would have given us a prophet, we would have, we would have accepted the Torah and repented, etc., etc. So God gave them Bilam, and so here Bilam is making his prophecy, and then we get to verse 21, and he says, "Vayar es hakeni v'yisa moshelo v'yamer eitan moshavecha v'sim v'sela kanecha." When he saw the Canaanite, he took up his parable and said, "How firm is your dwelling place, and your nest is in a cliff." Verse 22, Ki im yihiyeh levaer kain adma ashur tishbeka. So for Kain is laid waste, how far will Assyria hold you captive? Then we get into the critical verses. Said V'yisa Moshelo Vayamer Oy mi yichiyeh misumo el. He took up his parable and said, Va'oy, who can survive these things from God? What's going to happen? Verse 24, V'tzim miyad kitim. Tzim means large ships, huge boats, not sfina. Sfina means like a little boat. A tzim is a huge boat. So huge boats will come from Kitim. We're going to see who the Kitim are. The Inu Ashur, and they will afflict Syria. Va'anu Aver, and they will afflict those on the other side. V'gamhu Ade Oved, and he will perish forever. So then says Bilam rose and he went home, and etc. All right. So we're going to come back to that, so you can keep those pages open. But to spring forward a little bit, we need to look at another verse, which is in the book of Bereshit, Genesis, chapter 16, verse 12. And there, it's talking about the birth of Ishmael. And so an angel tells Hagar to go back to her mistress Sarah, because she's going to have she's going to give birth to a son. And it says, verse 12, V'hu yihiyeh pera adam yado bakol v'yad kol bo. So he will be a wild ass of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand will be against him. Okay, so that word para adam is significant. We're going to come back to that. So then we go down to chapter 20, verses 15 through 17. And what happens is Sarah has thrown out Hagar, and Hagar is with her son Ishmael, and he's a baby. And Avram gave them food and water. And then verse 15 says, Vayichlu hamaim mina chemat. The water in the skin was finished. V'tashrech et hayeled tachas echad hasichim. And she threw the boy beneath one of the bushes. And then what does it say? So she throws her son, v'teilach, and she leaves him. She goes away. V'teishevra meneged herchak mitachave. And she throws him away. She leaves, and she sits down at a far distance. How far? Was it? Ki matrave keshet. It was several bow shots away. You know, if you could shoot the arrow, how many? Like, she was obviously pretty far away. Ki amra, she says, al ere b'mos hayeled. I can't. Let me not see the death of this child. V'teshev meneged, and she sat down at a distance. V'tisa es kola v'tevk. She lifted up her voice and she wept. So then, verse 17 says like this. It says, "Vishma Elokim es kol hana'ar." God heard the voice of the child. Vayikra malach Elokim el Hagar, and an angel of God called out to Hagar from heaven. Vayomer la, and he said to her, "Malach Hagar." He said, "What's going on with you, Hagar?" Al tiri, don't be afraid. Why? Kishama Elokim el kol hana'ar, because God has heard the voice of the boy. Ba'asher husham, as he is in his present state. Okay, so when Hashem sent his angel to save Hagar and Ishmael, so the heavenly tribunal was protesting and saying to God, look in the future at the future generations. This Ishmael is going to persecute and terrorize your children, the Bnei Israel. But Hashem said that that may be the case, but when I judge a person, I judge that person for who he is at that present time. Let reflected in the word ba'asher hu sham, as he is in his present state. Okay, so and by the way, this is a section that we read on Rosh Hashanah. We read that where in the High Holy Days, God's telling us basically. He judges us for how we are right then and there. So we should be in that state of penitence. All right. So then but to understand the cruelty, we need to, actually, let me skip this. Yes, I think I skipped the page. Okay. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Okay. So we see his cruelty in the words where it says, "V'hu yeh para adam." He will be a para adam, a wild ass of a man. So by using that, by that phraseology, para adam, it's not telling us he's going to be a wild man. When because the noun comes first and then the modifier in Hebrew. So when you're talking about like a white house, you say Beit Levan, okay, or a big boy, a Yeled Gadol, okay. So the first word is the noun. So the subject noun in describing Ishmael is para. He's wild, uncontrollable. Adam is the modifier. He's first and foremost a wild beast, and secondarily a man. When you think about the atrocities that they committed, okay, these are crimes against humanity. And on the simplest Torah massacre. These was even more barbaric than the Nazis. And when you think about it, the people who are supporting that and saying that, there's a justified response, etc. If you are celebrating crimes against humanity, it means that you don't have humanity. You're a subhuman. You're actually worse than an animal, because an animal only kills for food or hurts other animals if he's defending itself. Okay? That they don't, animals don't cause wanton destruction like that. They don't do the things that Hamas did. And anybody who can't see that is not a human being. The laws of civilization don't apply to people like that. Animals don't have human rights. They don't have, you don't give workman's comp to beavers. They don't form unions when they're building a dam. Okay? Birds don't, petition the government that the FAA, the FAA shouldn't give flight paths, and when they're heading south. They're not intelligent life. So this is telling us about Ishmael that there's that this wild, uncontrollable subhuman isn't entirely a person in essence. He's first and foremost para. Only secondarily is he an Adam. The fact that he's so cruel and heartless and so barbaric, it's also rooted in the treatment by his mother. When she saw that he was dying, so rather than hold him and comfort him and give her life for him, give her last bit morsel of food, drink, etc., like a Jewish mother would do, the Torah says v'tashlech es hayeled. She threw the boy under a bush. So where do we see that type of treatment? I mean, so we see Arab mothers celebrating the deaths of their sons as shaheeds, as suicide bombers. When they interview them in the news, I don't think that they're just that they're not just talking to the camera. My wife, Lahavdul Elf of Dulles, when my son completed Shas for the first time, he completed the entire Talmud for the first time, we were exhilarated, we were thrilled. Okay, so Lahavdul, the same joy that we have in seeing our child become, a real fine Torah scholar, that Lahavdil is the same joy. I mean, that the Arab mothers experience that joy when their sons kill themselves to kill Jews. But it makes sense because because that type of wild, heartless insanity, that's an honor to them. Because as creatures who are principally wild and uncontrollable, that's why they're uncivilized and heartless. Their cruelty is perpetrated in the name of Allah. Their butchery at the point of a sword. That's their whole raison d'etre. They live for that. That gives them meaning and purpose in life. Now, in the end of days, we have the fourth and final exile is the exile of Edom, of the Roman exile. The first one was in Babylonian exile. The second was a Persian exile. The third one was the Greek exile, and the fourth one was the Roman exile. So we're at the end of the Roman exile, but we have various midrashim that tell us that at the end of the Roman exile, there's sort of like an epilogue. There's or like the final chapter before the conclusion, and that final chapter is called Galus Ishmael, and the Ishmaelite exile, and that will be the most brutal of all. But it'll sort of be like a combination of the three preceding exiles. It'll take the worst of all of them, and so the cruelty of Babylon and the attacks against Jewish life in the Persian exile, or in the story of Haman when he wanted to exterminate all the Jews. You're going to have that element to it, and the Roman exile when we're under the jackboot of the nations, and we're really subjugated to their whims. We have to wheel and deal and etc. We're not the top nation. And then the other component is like the Greek exile. It will take place in the land of Israel. Fascinating. So, Galus Ishmael, the Ishmaelite exile will take place in the land of Israel, and we will be dominated by Ishmael, whose decrees will be more heinous than any other that we will have experienced prior to then. Now, the Midrash tells us that there are two nations, or 70 root nations in the world, and Israel is the 71st. But of all of the nations in the world, only two have God's name in their name. One is Yisrael, El is God's name, and the other is Yishmael. So we're learning from that a couple things. Number one, Yisrael means that you have struggled against God, you've prevailed over God, that we earn His love and admiration. We challenge God. He gave us the Torah, and He gave us the tools for living and how to understand our obligations in this world, and what our purpose is. But He gave us the tools, and so when we encounter questions, we have the tools in Torah analysis. So even if it's not maybe God's will, but since we've reached that conclusion on our own, He exceeds to what we say. So for instance, the proclamation of the new month when the temple's standing. So you need 2 witnesses to have seen the new moon, and only when they testify in front of the Sanhedrin that they saw the new moon, that then becomes Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the new month. So it could have been that the new moon was yesterday, but we couldn't see it. We could only see it today, which means that then today's the first day, and so the holidays will, fall according to that proclamation. All right. So that is and also Yashar means straight, upright, rectitude. So we walk with rectitude with the Almighty. That's who we are. Now, the name Yishmael means Hashem will hear. And in the end of days, because of Galus Yishmael, the persecution that we will suffer in the land of Israel, it's going to prompt the entire Jewish people to call out, to cry out to God, and then God will hear. He'll hear us. The Mishnah in Sota says, the final Mishnah in Sota says that after all these things befall us and all the suffering that we go through, we are going to realize Ein lanu al mi lismoch ela Avinu shebashamayim. We have no one else that we can depend upon but our Father in heaven. So when Israel gets to that state, and perhaps we already are in that, when we call out in unity for God to save us, then the Mashiach will reveal Himself. But that's a precondition. That's another precondition. Okay, so let's return to the prophecy of Bilam, and we're going to get into the depths of, we're going to probe the depths of that, and we're going to see some fascinating things as they relate to our time. So chapter 24, verse 24 says, big ships will come from Kittim, and will afflict Syria and afflict those on the other side. So when it says Kittim, so Kittim is a word, it's plural for the word Kat. Kat means a group. So it's a collection of entities. So where the sources tell us, and we're going to see this upcoming, that the Kittim are the Romans. The Rome was a was a republic of various states. So who was Rome today? Well, Rome became Christianity, which became the Christian West, and so the descendants of Rome are the 35 root Christian nations. Now, we said there's 70 nations. Half of them are aligned with Christianity. Half of them are aligned with Islam. So the Christian nations would, of course, include, all the European nations, America, the other Commonwealth countries, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, South and Central America. So in other words, Kittim is referring to the Christian West. So Kittim is the Roman Republic, and then its descendants, namely Western Christendom. Okay, now we're going to see some other critical names here. So if you turn in the book of Genesis, chapter 10, it says these are the descendants of the sons of Noah. So Elah told us b'nei Noah. So chapter 10. So Genesis chapter 10, verses 1 through 5. So Elah told us b'nei Noah. These are the descendants of the sons. These are the descendants of Noah. Shem, Cham, v'Yefet. So he had 3 sons: Shem, Cham, and Yefet. And then it says, V'yivaldu lehem banim achar mabul. And then those sons had children after the flood. So verse 2 says, B'nai Yefet, Gomer, Umagog, Umadai, Yavan, Tuval, Umeshech, V'tiras. So Yefet had a couple sons, Gomer, Magog, Madai, Yavan, Tuval, Meshech, and Tiras. Then the sons of Gomer, verse 3, B'nai Gomer were Ashkenaz, Rifat, and Torgama. Then we get into the sons of Yavan. So now we're talking about Yefet, Yavan, and then so Yavan's sons were, B'nai Yavan were Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. Okay? And then it says these nations, they're the islands of nations, they're separated in their lands, everyone according to their languages, by their families and by their nations. Okay, that was verse 5. So now notice, Kittim, Rome, are the sons of Yavan. Yavan is Greece, and that really was, from the time of Alexander up till Antiochus and the events surrounding Hanukkah, which represented the end of the Greek exile. They dominated the entire world, including the land of Israel, and it came to a crescendo with the Hanukkah story. Then after Yavan came Rome. So you'll notice the sons of Yavan, Greece, were Elisha, Tarshish, and Kittim, and Dodanim. So Kittim, so we said Yavan is Greece. Then their descendants were Kittim. Kittim were the Romans. They came and they took over and they dominated us. And now, who were they? Where do they come from? So Rome is Italy. Yavan, Greece, and Rome and Greece are connected. They're geographically co-located, in the Eastern Mediterranean. And Rome is, of course, the cultural heir to Greece. So we continue, and we then go back to Bilam's prophecy, verse 23, and it says, "V'yisa Moshelo v'yomru oy mi yichiyeh mesumo el." He took up his parable and said, "Who can survive these things from God?" Now, one of the sources that we have to expound upon the Torah, the meaning of the words, is called the Targum Yonasan. And the Targum Yonasan, his name was Yonasan ben Uziel, and he made the translation of Lashon HaKodesh of Hebrew into Aramaic. But not only did he translate into Aramaic, but he provided additional commentaries based upon Torah that he learned from his teachers. So he translates verse 23, and it says, "V'natal metel navuse ve'amar vai man yiskayam bezman di'yisgale memre de Hashem lemetan agav tov letzadikaya lemitpara mina rishaya umechatet umaya umalkaya umagare elaine be'elaine." All right, so how do we translate that? So he's saying there that so who is woe to the one who will survive when Hashem reveals his word. All right, so when Hashem reveals his word, that means that the world is going to be so utterly inundated with God consciousness. The Jewish people are going to be elevated to the level of prophets. When Mashiach comes, the Jewish people will all attain the level of prophecy. But in the lead up to that, it's not going to be roses. So who's gonna survive when Hashem reveals his word? His word, he will give great reward to his righteous and exact payment from the wicked to crush or trample the nations and kings who agitate against one another. Now, this is fascinating because it's telling us that the redemption is going to come about when the global leaders are agitating against one another, when they're all involved in a world war. So in the end of days, before the advent of the Mashiach, that final war is called Milchamas Gog and Magog, the war of Gog and Magog. Now, these wars are going to target the Jewish people in large part to destroy our communities, to weaken our Torah and our communal infrastructure and our institutions, and to harass us physically. So these are but God in His mercy realized that the suffering would be too unbearable, so He divided it up into 3 sections. The Chafetz Chaim, who was Rav Yisrael Meir Kagan, who was a great leader from Radin in Poland, who's the author of the book Chafetz Chaim and many other books. He died in 1936. Before he died, he taught that the final war of Gog and Magog will be divided up into 3 historical events. The first one was World War I. The second one is World War II. And the final war of Gog and Magog is going to be one final world war to draw matters to a close, at which point God will activate His anointed one, the Mashiach. It appears that now we are on the precipice of that final war. After the Simchas Torah massacre, we are in a state of shock at what's happened. Things we couldn't have imagined just a few weeks ago. Now we've crossed the Rubicon, and we understand intuitively that the situation has been taken to a new dimension. That horrific slaughter that the Ishmaelites perpetrated against the Jewish people are a Holocaust-level event. 1,400 Jews slaughtered in the space of 24 hours, maybe a couple hours more, with greater barbarity and cruelty than we have ever seen in probably in the last 2,000 years. I mean, you could maybe say the Spanish Inquisition was pretty bad, burning people at the stake. The bastonada, where they slice their feet, the soles of their feet, and then they'd put butter on them and roast their feet. That was pretty cruel. But the Ishmaelites have exceeded that. Now, I was listening to a shir by Rav Shraga Kalas, who's a Maggid shir in Torah or in Yerushalayim, and he said that this was not just midas hadin. This wasn't just measure for measure, God's justice. It was a birya chadasha. It was a new creation. It's beyond. This isn't measure for measure retribution, let's say, for the sins of the far left and the secular Jews. I mean, it just so happens that the vast majority of the Jews who were slaughtered outside of Gaza on October 7th were far left-wing leftists. These were peaceniks. Either were the ones who voted for far left parties, anti-religious parties, so you could say, well, yeah, maybe if something, I don't know, like maybe if there would have been like a terrible tragedy at the Raves festival, okay, that was punishment. But the way that it happened, you had 1,400 people murdered, tortured, kidnapped. Each one of those 1,400 experienced several war crimes against humanity. All right, this was beyond anything we had ever seen before. And it was even worse than the Holocaust because at least the Germans tried to cover their tracks. They put these concentration camps outside of the public view. They had proxies do it. They didn't have the Germans directly involved. And when they were losing the war, they tried to burn everything and hide it. The Arabs didn't. I mean, they live broadcast it, on their, at their GoPro cameras. So we are now in a state of shock and outrage. And worse, the world's reaction of the majority of this world is to blame the Jews for the terrorism that they suffered. It didn't happen in a vacuum. You keep them in an outdoor, an open air prison. I mean, it's such BS that the ones who Israel has not been in Gaza since 2005. That's 18 years. The state, the governing authority, is Hamas. Okay? They are keeping them in an outdoor prison. But on the other side, now that their anti-Semitism has been unmasked, it's shocking even to a lot of normal Westerners who see that these sophisticated professors at Cornell who were exhilarated, at Columbia Law School, who celebrates this and was passing out candy. So again, subhuman. You're not talking about human beings. We don't. In my view, they don't even get human rights. They're not even entitled to human rights because they're not human. Human beings don't do that. Okay? Only subhumans do. But they're unmasked. So at least we know who the enemies are. Now, interesting. Rav Mendel Kessin was giving a class, and he was talking about these, this period that we're in right now. And as a result of these events, you now have Jews worldwide threatened. All the Jews are living in fear and disbelief. How many years? 70 years, 80 years after the Holocaust. And they're celebrating it and want to do it again. So what's going on here? So Rav Kessin taught that as we move into that final stage, there's a process called birur. Birur means sorting out or selecting. So God is sifting through, he's sorting out the righteous from the wicked. So little do the non-Jews know, except my friends who are worthy of hearing this, that final war of Gog and Magog will result in 2/3 of the world being destroyed, killed. And the Vilna Gaon taught, he died in 1777, he taught in the 1700s, that final war will last for 9 minutes. Okay? And the descriptions in the prophets are descriptions of, nuclear blasts and, the skin melting off and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we are going through this birur process right now. So in light of that, the reaction of so many wicked goyim to this horrific attack on Simchas Torah makes perfect sense. Because Yishmael's Holocaust level attack on the Jewish people has provoked 2 primary responses, one from the goyim and one from the Jews. Now, I use the word goyim in the pejorative sense because I'm talking about people who are evil goyim. I'm not talking about, nice non-Jewish people that we're friendly with, that we went to high school with and stuff like that. People who called us up and, expressed their concern, the normal people. I'm talking about the far left, the radical Arabs, etc. Those people who celebrated this atrocity, calling for the genocide of the Jewish people, calling Israel a colonizer, okay? In spite of the fact that there is live stream footage of the atrocities. Okay, those people who were exhilarated by that have unknowingly just signed their own death warrants and condemned themselves to eternal destruction. They've, who's on my team and who hates me. So those people said, we hate you. Because the Jewish people brought ethical monotheism, the belief in one God, morality to civilization. So anybody who hates us fundamentally hates God, which is fairly true when you think about it. Now, so that's one response. The other response has been the impact on the Jewish people. The unity in the Jewish world today is stunning. It's probably fair to say that never before in history, at least dating back to the times of the first temple, never before has Am Yisrael been so united. The disillusionment that many Jews felt that their social and political bedfellows don't care or are on the other side is a sense of betrayal. We thought you were our friends. Well, you're clearly not. But because of this great unity, the world has no idea in hell what they have done for us. We are so united, so disillusioned by our erstwhile friends, that we now all realize, every Jew realizes that it is us against the world, and that we have no one upon whom we can rely except our Father in heaven. Now, Rabbi Keston taught also that from this event, because of the gravity of it, and then the response to it, where it's the exact opposite of what civilized human beings how they should respond. Animals, or subhumans, worse than animals, that God is hastening the redemption. He's unified the entire Jewish people, such that we were almost at the point of civil war in Israel, but he's shown the utter fecklessness of the Israeli security establishment. He's shown the foolishness of the far-left peaceniks, and it's rattled the secular left in Israel that wants to make Israel a Jewish Paris on the Riviera, with promiscuity, nude sunbathing, immodesty, sexual non-restraint, drug and alcohol abuse, etc. So their gods have been shattered, so to speak. In order to accelerate this process, he appears to be bringing the world to the point of Armageddon. Now, interestingly enough, I was thinking about this. The leader of the free world is the United States. And we say, Lev Malchut b'Shamayim hi. The heart of kings is in the hands of heaven. So who did he put in the leadership role? A senile, corrupt moron who staffed his administration with the most radical elements from the Obama administration. But it's interesting because for his entire career, Biden was a stalwart friend of Israel, the Jewish people. He was an active supporter of the AIPAC agenda. I met him in AIPAC one year. He's instinctively a staunch ally. As a matter of fact, when he was in Israel last week and he met with Rabbi Yitzhak Berry, who's the head of United Hatzalah, which is first responders in Israel consisting of Jews, Christians, and Arabs, who are medics and doctors and things like that, all on a voluntary basis. So Yitzhak Berry showed Joe Biden pictures and videos of the massacre, where they murdered the husband, burned the baby alive in an oven, and raped the mother on top of her dead husband, where they were gouging out the eyes of people, amputating the feet of little girls before killing them. I mean, the Biden saw these things, and it brought him to tears. It instinctively brought him to tears. But he's an Obama holdover, so he's being led by Obama Yamach Shemo, which is evidenced by, of course, the tension between the Biden White House and Netanyahu. As a matter of fact, Obama's useful idiots and the Israeli far left, before the massacre, they were lobbying Washington to refuse Netanyahu an invitation. But now, suddenly, Biden has become the biggest Zionist, sent 2 massive carrier strike groups to the region. He's armed Israel to the teeth. He's given us the most sophisticated weapon systems, an additional $14 billion to the war effort to prop up the economy, to pay for the weapon systems that we need. We now have companies of Marines pouring into Israel from Kuwait, armed, ready to go. Spec ops are on the ground in Gaza. All of these things are happening now. In fact, he is the only time that U.S. president has ever come to Israel during times of war. As a matter of fact, the U.S. threatened Hezbollah and Iran not to get involved in the conflict because if they do, they're going to have to deal with the U.S. of A. Now that also never happened. It never happened that the U.S. was itching to get into a fight and join the war effort, in alliance with Israel. In the past, the U.S. would send assistance, financial, rearm us, send advisors, intel, etc. But this time they've given us everything, including the kitchen sink. So was there suddenly a rapprochement between a liberal American president and a right-wing religious leadership in Israel? Of course these things don't happen on their own. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has interceded, and he orchestrates all the events from above. Like it says, Lev Malchut B'Shamayim Hi. The heart of the kings is in the hands of heaven. America now wants to neutralize Iran, who are in access with Russia and China. Up until a few weeks ago, the U.S. was giving Iran $6 billion in aid to attempt to sway them to become a responsible nation. But then this Holocaust event occurred, with Iran sponsoring Hamas and other proxies in the area. So that's sort of put on hold. Now, the last thing is we are likely going to see that a guy asked me recently, do I think Israel is getting fair treatment in the media? Well, it never does, except on Fox, in the independent channels. But I told him it doesn't matter, because events are going to stay ahead of the news cycle. You're going to see when they're talking about, the atrocity in Jabalia refugee camp, etc., before they can start, before they can, dray our cup with that and start pressuring us, you'll see there'll be a massive terrorist attack in Europe or in America or something like that. It's one of the reasons, by the way, that I said that, that why Hashem put a doddering old fool in the White House to lead the free world, a guy who, doesn't get up before 10 a.m. and calls a lid at 2 p.m., who clearly is suffering from dementia, just is, stumbles over his words, can't walk up a flight of stairs, etc. I was wondering what kind of idiot opens a southern border and allows, 8 million people to come through. Well, how else is Hashem going to get terror cells of Hamas and Hezbollah and Al-Qaeda and ISIS into America to commit atrocities? You'll see. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but the likelihood of that happening, Christopher Wray just said yesterday that the chances of another 9/11 type event have gone up dramatically. Duh. Well, it's because you have a doddering fool in the White House. This is all to accelerate the Messianic redemption. Okay, let's go to the next source. The next source is in the book of Genesis, the war of the 4 kings against the 5 kings. Genesis chapter 14, verse 1, it says, Vahi b'mei Amraphel melech Shinar, Aryach melech Elasar, Kedorlaomer melech Elam, Tidal melech Goyim. So it happened in those days, so those 4 kings. So the head honcho was Kedorlaomer, and he was the most powerful king, and he had 5 vassal states under him. And those 5 rebelled against him. And so those 4 kings defeated the 5 kings, and in so doing, they captured Lot. Lot was the nephew of Avram, who is the forebearer to the Messiah. Lot was carrying the seed of Mashiach. When he had children, one of his offspring eventually became the first king of Israel, King David. So the idea of the 4 kings capturing Lot is the idea of these 4 kings, powerful kings in the world, restraining the redemption. So those 4 kings and 5 kings agitating against one another to capture the seed of the Mashiach. And interestingly enough, when Avram loaded up his retinue and took on those 4 kings and liberated Lot, it was in the year 2023 on the Jewish calendar. We're now in 5784. That's measured as 5784 from the creation of spiritual man, meaning the generation of Adam. Abraham was born in 1948, which is the year Israel in 1948 in the Jewish calendar. Of course, we know 1948 in the secular calendar was the founding of the state of Israel. So when Avram defeated these 4 kings, that was in the year 2023. So, in other words, that the ultimate redemption was precipitated by the catalyst of those 4 kings destroying the 5 kings, which later on brings about the messianic redemption. Now, we're gonna pull out some of those that prophecy from Bilam for the remaining few minutes, and we're going to see something interesting. So it says here in the Targum Yonasan, okay, so on Bilam's prophecy, chapter Numbers 24, verse 24, says, Tzim miyad Kitim. So big ships will come out from the coast of Kitim, which is Rome, Italy, America. Okay? Ve'inu Ashur, and they will afflict Syria. Ve'inu Ever, and those on the other side. V'gamhu ade oved, and he will be destroyed forever. I believe that on the other side is referring to on the other side of Syria, which would be on the other, east of Syria, which we're talking about would be Iran and other proxies. So how does the Targum Yonasan translate this? So he says, tzitzin, tzitzin yitztarchan b'mane zayna v'yifkun ba'achlusin sigiin min Lambarnia umeara Italia. So groups will go out with their weapons, and they will go out with huge numbers of soldiers on boats from Italy. V'yitztarfun belegionim de Yifkon min Constantina v'tzarun le'ature v'shabdun kol bano de'ever. Listen to this. Again, those groups will go out with their weapons, with huge numbers of soldiers on boats from Italy. And they will be joined by legions from Constantina, which is Turkey, and will harass Syria, and they will subjugate the B'nai Aver. The B'nai Aver refers to both Yisrael and Yishmael, but particularly Yishmael in this case. But Baram Sofehon, in the end, the Elaine, all of those people, Lemefal biyad malka Mashiach. They will all be destroyed at the hands of the Mashiach forever. That's how the Targum Yonasan is explaining that verse 24:24. Let me make sure I skip the page here. Okay. Okay. So, all right, so also in verse 23, it says, Vayisa mishalo vayomer mi yichia meshumo el. Who's going to survive when God imposes his and he imposes his word? Great ships will come out from Kittim, will flee the Syria on the other side, etc. So Rashi explains, I'm not going to read it in Hebrew. He said, it's so when it mentioned Rashi says, since he mentioned the captivity in Syria, he was saying who's going to survive when God imposes these things, meaning who's going to keep himself alive when God is imposing his decrees. Sennacherib will arise and jumble the nation, and there will come, and then he says, there will come great ships from the realm of Kittim, and there shall pass the Kittim, who are the Romans, will come in great sailing ships against Syria. Rashi points out the same thing. The Ramban, Nachmanides, says on verse 24, there is no one who will be saved. I got the Hebrew translation here, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to read the English. So there will be no one, there's no one who will be saved from that great and awesome day of Hashem against all the peoples. The following, as the verse says, big ships will come from the place in Kittim, those being the Romans. By the way, the Ramban lived in the 1500s. Nachmanides in the 1500s. So the ships will come from the land of the Romans. They will afflict Assyria, while they'll also afflict Aver. Those being the Israelites, meaning to say that the Romans will afflict both the exilers, those who exiled the Jews, the original the Syrians, and the exiled, the Jewish nation. No one will be spared. But in the end, the people of Kittim will be destroyed forever by the hand of the Mashiach. In recent years, after Assad attacked his own people with chemical warfare and other brutal means, he gave Iran a foothold in Syria. And Israel responded to those with periodic attacks. But the situation is far more dangerous than we can imagine, because Iran's proxies are being armed and activated against Israel. We're talking about Hezbollah and the Syrian militia groups in the north, Hamas in the south, the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria. And in addition, the infiltration into the United States through various terrorist groups through the southern border. Iran is now filling the power vacuum left by the Americans in Iraq and Afghanistan. Again, the absolute foolhardy action that God put into Biden's head to do in abandoning Afghanistan. The American people don't realize what a huge, that was not shooting yourself in the foot. That was shooting yourself in the femoral artery. Afghanistan, we controlled the entire country from a couple bases, from Bagram and one more up north. We had full spectrum air, land, spec ops, satellite, etc., that were coming out and that would help and assist the Afghan army. And it was, I think, 20 miles from the Chinese border, one of these bases. And when America pulled up, they left over $80 billion in military hardware, which is actually about $10 billion more than the entire Russian defense budget. That's how much was left. And so now who's filling that? And Afghanistan, by the way, is like the Saudi Arabia of precious industrial use minerals. All that we controlled, just gave it away. Utter fool. So so Iran is now Iran is building bases in the north of Israel, in Syria, and the Golan Heights. And they have been, and these proxies have been taunting, America or Israel for the longest time. Notwithstanding America's threats to Iran, the message doesn't seem to be getting through. They've attacked the United States 27 times, U.S. bases in the region since October 7th. And the only retaliation from America came in blowing up some empty arms warehouses. Once Iran and the U.S. enter the war, the likelihood of Russia coming to Iran's support, is likely. Iran is one of Russia's chief external arms suppliers of drones and artillery, which they're using in their war against the Ukraine. And recently, Iran's other ally, China, has dispatched ships to the region. But the Ramban continues, and he says, don't be astonished at this, out of the fact that because the third kingdom represented by the beast in Daniel's dream was Greece. As it says explicitly over there, the Kittim were from the seed of Yavan. And then it says the sons of Yavan were Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. For indeed it is true, the sages said that Italia of Yavan is the great city of Rome, because it's well known that their name and language is of Rome is known by the language of Italia. So we'll stop here, and we will pick it up next week. We still have a lot more to go. So that was an hour, and we will continue with what happens next. But preview of coming attractions. We have a midrash which says that in that final battle, Persia will attack Arabia. Arabia will go to the king of Rome to seek advice. Persia will threaten to destroy the entire world, which don't be surprised if they already do have an A-bomb. And Israel will be shaking in its boots, followed by Mashiach. We'll get there next week.